This is a follow-up video that I am making after I did this one back in January 30th of 2025. And I'll explain what all this means as we go through it. But for perspective, for orientation in this video, okay, my perspective, and you can do whatever you want to do, is that books are not religions, obviously. So the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, or Bhagavad Gita, these represent a philosophy called Vedanta. A religion that sprung from Vedanta is called Shaivism. Shaivism is not Hinduism. Hinduism is kind of a broad word. There's lots of different branches of Hinduism. You could say Christianity is many, many different sects. Same thing for Hinduism. Shaivism is one of them. In Shaivism, they view Shiva as the deity to worship, the same way that Christians and Jews have their deity to worship. But you can read the Upanishads, the Gita, and the Bible and not worship any deity. And that's the approach that I take. When it comes to the Bible, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, and I would suggest that this should be the religion of Christianity. Doing what Jesus said, becoming as Jesus told Christians and us, cultural Christians, like pretty much everybody on the West is a cultural Christian. So this is the message of Jesus. This should be the message of Christianity, but unfortunately it isn't, as we'll see in this video. So this is Bob being not very Christian. Bob does not know what a biblical sinner is. A biblical sinner is called a hamartolos, plural, hamartoloi. What is a hamartoloi? Hamartolos. What is one? An uncivilized barbarian that is stained with certain crimes or vices. That's what a biblical sinner is. Are you a biblical sinner? Bob told Dicaios, Danny Jones, you can watch this video, that he is a biblical sinner, which means Bob does not understand the message of Jesus. It's amazing. It's really scary. So I've done most of my videos go after some of the foolishness. So I'm not an anti-Bible guy. I'm an anti-idiot guy. I'm an anti of my own idiot guy. I'll show you what I mean in a couple seconds. So we have to appreciate, in terms of the Bible, that the original Bible, New Testament, written in Greek, almost exclusively, for practical purposes, exclusively Greek. Then we have our English mistranslation of many words. Many words, many verses are misinterpreted or mistranslated based upon simple English language that does not convey the proper meaning of the original Greek words. So most Christians don't even look at their Bibles. 82% only look at their Bibles on Sundays while at church, which means hardly at all. Basically, practically speaking, not at all. And this is why this Foundation for Christian Market Research says that Christians don't read their Bible. Most Christians blindly believe what they were told as children in Sunday school, which means they are conditioned believers. You don't want to be a believer. So Bob does not understand his own book, as I just showed you. Bob also does not understand who or what Shiva is, the mythological deity called Shiva. So this fool actually thinks that this made-up mythological deity can possess people. And he thinks that 50% of pot smokers are possessed by a made-up demon that he calls Shiva, because Shiva's not a demon. He thinks Shiva is the Lord of destruction and the Lord of death, right? Which means he comes to kill people. What an idiot. Here we go. So this is just a video you can watch if you wish. Now just look at the title. Lord Shiva drank poison to save the world. How could he be the destroyer if he drank poison to save the world in Hindu mythology, or Indian mythology? So this is from the BBC. So Shiva drank the poison to save the world. It caused him great agony. And as a pain reliever, Parvati offered him ground up marijuana to soothe the pain. Now, let's just say this was 2000 BC, allegedly, whatever. But 4,000 years ago is where the story came from. 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, Indian mythology involved the consumption of marijuana for pain reduction, which is 100% consistent with what we know today. Not everybody who smokes marijuana gets pain relief, but for many, the relief is substantial. Bob would of course argue against that because Bob is a manifestation of the demon Apasmara upon which Shiva dances when Shiva does the Lord of the dance. So here is Bob bullshitting on Danny Jones about Shiva. He says Shiva is the Lord of death and destruction. Danny Jones goes, well, he must be, I'm assuming he's the Hindu devil, right? Because what does Danny Jones know? I mean, Danny Jones doesn't know anything about this stuff. So in actual fact, if Shiva was the Lord of death, then why would Shiva have killed the Lord of death? Why would Shiva have conquered time and death if Shiva was the Lord of death and Yama is the male god version of the Lord of death? I think Kali is the female god of death. But it's more involved than that. It's not just like the superficial way that clowns like Bob view things. But broadly speaking, Shiva is the destroyer of evil. Broadly in terms of the world, but then individually, here's how the conceptualization of Shiva is to work. So what I'm circling is the outline of the human body. This is the ignorant mind and ego within the human body. So the mind-body complex. We, in terms of how Vedanta is written and how Shiva is conceptualized, we must act like Shiva to overcome the ignorance of the body-mind complex. That's all it is. It's that simple. That simple. So this, Apasmara, is the dwarf demon of ego and ignorance. So just get rid of dwarf demon and just view it as Apasmara is the ego and ignorance of the mind-body complex. So Shiva is a manifestation of overcoming ignorance and evil. And Shiva is an archetype based upon what is written in the Upanishads and Gita, which is about overcoming ignorance and evil. Right? So in our own lives, in my life, I let my hair grow long for pictures like this. In my life, and in your life, Satan is not outside of you. We are the mind-body complex. We are Apasmara in our own bodies. Or our mind-body complex is Apasmara, and we, the true self, are supposed to overcome the mind-body complex Apasmara by manifesting what is taught in the Gita and the Bible, by the way, both apply. So Shiva is known as the destroyer within the Hindu Trinity. Shiva, Supreme Lord, who creates, protects. Remember, he drank the poison to save the world and transforms the universe. So these are images of Shiva. Pretty cool. Very similar. I mean, it's hard to get cooler imagery than Hindu mythology and Greek mythology. Here he is getting ready to do the dance and getting ready to crush Apasmara. And Apasmara, the demon of ignorance and evil, body identification, is being crushed by Lord Shiva. Isn't that cool? So Shiva is the destroyer of ignorance. And he is a manifestation of the story about overcoming evil and ignorance, which we have in the Upanishads and the Gita. So, for fun, let's look at Bob's God and see what Bob's God is like. So we're going to go to Genesis 8. Now, look at this. The only reason Bob's God in Genesis 8 said he wouldn't kill everybody on earth again is because Bob's God loves the smell of burnt flesh. Read this for yourself if you wish. The pleasing aroma of burnt flesh Yahweh loves so much, he promised, I will never destroy all living creatures again. Now that would suggest that the Bible is just a horrific book, but I find the Bible to be as useful broadly as the Upanishads and Gita. They convey different messages. The allegorical context of these three books, well, you could really say that this is one book, right? Because this is actually one book. The Gita is how Krishna conveyed the Upanishads to a dude named Arjuna. So this is really just Vedanta and the Bible. And to me, they both provide value that the others don't provide. So I am happy with both of them. I like both books. So let's look more about Bob's God. So remember, the only reasons Bob God said he wouldn't kill everyone again is because he loves the smell of burnt flesh. So he killed everybody. But he said he wouldn't kill everybody again, but he did kill other people. This is Bob's God in 1 Samuel 15, where Yahweh commands the genocide of the Amalekites. Look what. So Samuel told Saul that Yahweh wants you to be king, but to become king, Saul, you must kill and destroy everything in the Amalekites. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, and infants, and kill all their livestock. So Saul spared the king and the best livestock, which pissed off Yahweh. And that is why Yahweh said Saul cannot be king, because he didn't kill everything. He spared the king and the best livestock. So in verse 33 of 1 Samuel 15, it was Samuel who then murders the king Agag in the presence of Yahweh. Right, so he's worried about Shiva. I'd be worried about Yahweh. Now, both are, of course, mythological deities. So what do we have in Numbers? This is where Moses kills all the Midianites except for the virgins. This is Moses, General Moses, asking his soldiers, have you allowed the women to live? Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who slept with a man, but keep the virgins for yourselves. You can keep every girl for yourself who's never slept with a man. So Numbers 31, 32, you can see the plunder. Of the plunder, this is what Yahweh gets. Remember Yahweh, who likes the smell of burnt flesh? Well, he gets all these sheep and he gets 32 virgins. Remember, because they only kept the virgins. So the God who loves the smell of burnt flesh in this story called the Bible likes virgins, and he likes gold. So 16,000 shekels of gold were delivered to Yahweh. So there you go. You can see that, Bob's mythological book is much more scary than Shiva by a long shot. So again, we have books are not religions. Religions that are based upon books. Okay, well, this should be the religion. It should be, Christians should manifest this religion, right? Have faith in what Jesus told them to do. Become innocent, and then you'll enter. He actually said in Matthew 18:3 that unless you become innocent again like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That's Jesus' actual language, not my language. That's Jesus' language. So unfortunately, it turns out, as you'll see, that Shiva is a manifestation of the yoke of Jesus. So you can find the yoke of Jesus, obviously, in the Bible. Shiva is a manifestation of it. Now, what does Christianity manifest like? Do they manifest this? Not even close. They manifest Armageddon, praying for the end of the world. If you don't believe their fairy tales, they say you're going to hell. And who are they? They are scapegoaters. And here's one of their representatives. This is Christianity versus what Jesus said for us to do, those of us who have read the book. So we're going to move away from this now, and demonstrate to you, I'm going to explain to you more about the nature of Shiva so you can appreciate it. And I'm going to do it from the perspective of these books as well as the scientific literature, which is kind of interesting. So philosophically speaking, this is Vedanta. Shiva is an archetype of the true self, which I'm manifesting as this image right here. True self, unencumbered by material issues, true self. And so philosophically, Shiva is an archetype of the true self and not a god to worship. We, and you'll see even Jesus says this, we, the true self, must be as Shiva and override the ignorance and nonsensical talk of our individual mind-body complexes, the false self, Apasmara, we animate during a life cycle. That is the essence of Vedanta. So here you can see a silhouette of a human female, alive because the true self is bringing to life the false self, the mind-body complex, which manifests emotionally, egomaniacally, ignorantly as Apasmara. So you can see how we can view ourselves as Shiva overcoming ignorance. If you choose to. If not, do what you want. So I'll give you more information about how to look at this now, and then I'll kind of end with showing you this image again before I show you some more stuff. Okay, so why is true self a reasonable word? Well, true self is probably the best way to view the soul. Why? Because the Christian view of the soul is a watered-down version of what came from the original Greek. The original Greek, we are told, and you can see it is here's the word, is suke. So suke refers to life force that animates the body. It's immortal and pre-existing in terms of Plato. Plato lived 400 plus BC, something around that time, which was before the actual Old Testament was written in Alexandria, according to the Gad Barnea, who was a pretty well-known biblical scholar, archaeologist who worked at the University of Haifa in Israel. So the term suke existed before the word soul were created in Hebrew. So suke is the true self. It is the animator. It is the consciousness. It is the awareness. You listening, according to this view, you can view it, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but according to this view, the Vedanta view, and presumably, I can't say for sure the Old Greek, but the Vedanta view is that I am the true self talking to you through my mind-body complex. And my mind-body complex has a voice that's different than yours, and I'm speaking, and you're listening with, and you, the true self, are listening to me through your mind-body complex. The issue is that the fusing, the interface of the true self and the mind-body complex is so subtle and so complete that we think we are the body mind complex rather than the true self. Okay, so that is the purpose of Vedanta, to know our true self. And that's also what Jesus said. I'll show you in a couple seconds. Here it is. So Temple of Apollo, know your true self. Upanishads and Gita, I just showed you, know your true self. Gospel of Thomas, which some Christians reject. Okay, so if you are innocent and are in the kingdom of heaven, you would know your true self. If you're pure in heart, you would know God, according to your God, according to your Lord. If you're unselfish, this is how you get into the kingdom of heaven, and in the kingdom of heaven, you know who your true self is. So what does Jesus say in verse 3? When you come to know yourselves, the true self, the Purusha is and Atman are Sanskrit words that are synonymous with true self with slightly different meanings. So Jesus said, when you come to know yourself as the true self, then you'll become known, and it will be you, and you will realize that it is you, the true self, who are the sons of the living Father. But if you don't know your true self, you will dwell in poverty. Poverty is the mind-body complex, the false self, the disgusting human turd machine is the false self. And if we do not know our true selves, we will be poverty. That's verse 3. Look what Jesus said in verse, or the Jesus character, right? Because all this to me is myth. Messages from, well, you'll see how I view this at the end if you choose to listen to the rest of this. So in verse 29 in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, if the flesh, the false self, the turd machine, right, and that brought Apasmara to awareness, the mind awakens. Apasmara, the mind of the mind-body complex awakens. If the flesh and mind came to being because of spirit, the true self, Purusha, Atman, Suke, it's a wonder. But if spirit, the true self, consciousness, this is what Jesus is saying, if consciousness came into being because of the body, it's a wonder of wonders. And we know now, the scientists of today know, and I'll show you who they are in a couple seconds, the scientists of today know that consciousness lives outside of the body. Yeah, so this language from the Gospel of Thomas is actually consistent with what is being discovered in science. Now, what does Jesus refer to the true self as? Jesus said, if the true self came into being because of the turd machine, that would be a wonder of wonders. So the Jesus character says, I'm amazed at how this great wealth, the true self, has made its home in this disgusting poverty called the mind-body complex, the false self, the turd machine. So it's a vehicle. Like we get into our car, we know we're not the car. We get out of our car, and we know we're not the car. That is the message of Vedanta, and it is the message of Jesus. And we can only know this if we become like this. So you can see how the Upanishads, Gita, and Thomas and Bible are very, very consistent. If you read it from the perspective of them being allegorical texts and books for knowledge rather than to worship a made-up deity. So here is the yoke of Jesus, right? Obvious. So if you become innocent like a child again, honest, innocent, pure in heart like a child, unselfish, and you are a non-materialist, how would you live your life? What would you be a manifestation of if you were doing this? And if the world did this, what would it be like? Now, if I was to say we should all be like this, most people would say, yeah, it's probably true. It doesn't mean you have to worship him as God. He didn't even say that. He said you must be like this to enter the kingdom. So if you were innocent, pure in heart, innocent like a child, pure in heart, unselfish, and were a passerby, wouldn't you be brave, truthful, honest, and choose right from wrong? Wouldn't you do that? Of course you would. And that is what the blue fairy told Pinocchio. And the blue fairy told Pinocchio, if you wish to be a real boy, it is entirely up to you. To become a real boy, you must do these things, which is exactly the same as these things. And if you were to do these things, wouldn't you also have the imagination of a child and be like Peter Pan? You sure would. So in actual fact, every one of us, true selves, manifesting our current false selves, were as this when we were 5 years old and younger. And here's how we know it from actual science in America. This is from Yale University scientists in 2014. They run the Yale University Baby Lab. Here's what they found. 3 to 6 month olds. 3 to 6 months olds are so moral. The true self is so moral, so unattached to false beliefs, so unattached to physical, mental distractions that the true self will spontaneously help others even at external cost to themselves. They'll be drawn to the good. They'll have aversion to the bad. They'll reward the good, they'll punish the bad, and they'll console those who are suffering. That is your true nature. That's the true nature of the true self that Christians call the soul and think that their view is so primitive. So this is George Land in 1968. He did a study looking at creativity for NASA and decided to look at children. He found that between 4 and 5 years of age, every one of us virtually, right, 100% of us have imaginations like Peter Pan. So we come in like this. The true self comes in like this and then gets corrupted by church and state. So you can see that why I did that video demonstrating why original sin is pure bullshit. Jesus himself demonstrates, hey, if you want to get back in, man, or however it works, because I don't know, you got to be like this. So Jesus is telling us to do what? Become our true selves. You can't worship Jesus and accept him. And if the fake prayer of Christianity actually did what they say it does, then Bob wouldn't be so ignorant, and all the other Christians wouldn't be so ignorant. So when you do the Lord of the Dance in your own world as Shiva, you can see that Shiva is a manifestation of the yoke of the blue fairy and the yoke of Jesus. Nothing to do with what morons like Bob think. So you can see this is what Jesus is telling us to be. He's telling us to be like Shiva in our own body, overcome our ignorance, right? Overcome the weakness of the mind-body complex. So here's how we should look at it. Male, female makes no difference. So from the view of Vedanta and Buddhism, we have been male, female, doesn't make any difference. And near-death experiencers describe that as well, that they have seen previous lives where they have been both male and then female. So we should view our body as the false self, the mind-body complex as Apasmara. We must overcome. So in the language of Vedanta, the our manifestation of Apasmara is a manifestation of the karma that we must overcome. That is the way it is looked at. So this is where I began this section, and we're going to go into, check this out. This is UCal or Caltech. So scientists at Caltech are looking at consciousness. So does consciousness continue after we die is the topic of this video. So these guys are Caltech PhDs looking into the nature of consciousness. This is Dr. Jim Tucker from where? From the Division of Perceptual Studies at the School of Medicine at the University of Virginia, where for the past 50 years, they've been looking at near-death experiences and children who remember past lives. And it turns out that Jim Tucker has studied many, many, many cases of reincarnation, and there are a total of 2,500 cases that have been fully documented since the late 60s at the University of Virginia's School of Medicine. So you should take this seriously versus how it was dismissed like the fools over at the Dunning-Kruger Fest at MythVision, who dismissed this out of hand with no knowledge at all. So interestingly, the Upanishads were first translated to English in 1805, and the Vedas date back to about 2000 BC. I mean, who knows for sure, right? But this is the important thing. Does consciousness continue after we die? So we are told that the true self is a mass of pure consciousness on page 79 in volume 2 of Nikhilananda's translation of the Upanishads. So 2000 BC, the Upanishads discussed that our true nature is a mass of pure consciousness, and that is what they're looking at now in major universities around the world, and it's completely lost by Christians, unfortunately. So again, we can see the true self is a mass of pure consciousness, animating a turd machine to overcome whatever karmic issues we must overcome. And it's hard to know this, obviously, because the human body acts as a consciousness-suppressing skin suit. So this is Dr. Bruce Grayson, who has worked for 50 years. 50 years, he worked at the University of Virginia. He studied near-death experiences, and here are 6 of his many papers. You can say terminal lucidity, distressing near-death experiences, and on down the line. And you can see where they're being published. They're being published in legit scientific journals, not some BS rag someplace. Bruce Grayson is also the man who started in 1982 with some others the Journal of Near-Death Studies. So you should take this very seriously. There's no bullshit here. Here's an example of a near-death experience or what he experienced. So this is what I have in yellow are his exact words. What I added to red and white are mine. It felt just amazing. So he was out of his body. It just felt amazing. And I, the true self, felt like I had been released from a dark, hot, stuffy closet. Yes, the turd machine, the false self. So he's telling us when he's out of the body. I kept thinking, how in the world did I forget who I really was? And how is it possible that I believe that I was this limited human creature, Apasmara? How could I believe that I was this turd machine rather than my true self? So this is me just kind of paraphrasing. I incorrectly believed that I was the weakness and poverty of the ignorant and emotion-driven mortal human turd machine. I actually believed myself to be the car rather than my true self, the conscious driver of the car. So that is what near-death experiencers will tell us. Now, I had a short one myself, by the way. So the best way to view this, as far as I can tell, is to view it as if we are in the carbon-based turd dimension. We're in the carbon-based turd dimension. We are a non-carbon-based mass of pure consciousness with mass. It's just not mass in the carbon-based sense. So on stage set Earth, the turd dimension, where we live, as we are suppressed in our human turd machines, and we are in a domain of ignorance, darkness, death, confusion, suffering, and hedonism. Why? to polish ourselves. So this is from a near-death experiencer too named Aaron Green. Stage set earth is a rock tumbler. Great way to describe it. A rock tumbler for the true self. Earthly incarnations allow the true self to become polished and refined and eventually free. It's called moksha in Sanskrit. Now that is a Vedantic and a Hindu and a Buddhist view. Whether it's true or not, I cannot say. But that is part of the philosophy. So this is how we should view being on earth. We are rough, need to be polished. So how do we do this? How do we do this? Well, we first have to free ourselves from all the myths that encumber us. Polish ourselves, polish our awareness. Now, how do we do this? My view, and this will be the last image I show you. My view is that these books and the yoke, which is the best of this book, and other things as well, but these books represent knowledge and information to help us understand that we are the true self and not the turd machine acting as Apasmara.